In 1959, a group of 10 hikers decided to go on a skiing expedition across a mountain in Western Soviet Union. The group consisted of 8 men and 2 women, all of which were grade 2 hikers, meaning they were highly experienced in skiing and were greatly familiar with the Siberian wilderness. This trip would eventually raise their status to grade 3, which was the highest certification at that time. But they never received the certification as they didn't return from this trip alive, and the cause of their deaths is still a well-debated topic on the internet. So let's take a look at the Dyatlov Pass Incident. The day was January 23rd, when Igor Dyatlov gathered a team of 10 from his university to board a train and be on their way to the Ural Mountains. Each member had a diary, and they even had a group diary which read, "I wonder what awaits us on this hike. Will anything new happen?" After getting off the train, the group used a variety of transportation methods including buses, trucks, sleighs, and horses until they finally started making their way through the mountain on their skis and feet. The group took several pictures throughout their trip. By January 28th, Yuri Yudin, one of the group members, felt sick and decided to head back while his 9 companions continued on with his trip. They took lots of photos together before parting ways and then continued on as planned. This was the last time Yuri ever saw his friends alive. The group documented their journey throughout the next few weeks using their diaries and cameras. The photos that were recovered showed that their journey was going just as planned, with no issues whatsoever. But then, on February 1st, was when things started to go south. They reached a pass in a mountain which they needed to cross before they could continue on further. The pass was later named the Dyatlov Pass after the group leader's name. The weather had gotten colder and harsher, and a blizzard seemed to be on its way. The group ended up at the foot of a mountain which the indigenous Mansi people called the Dead Mountain. At this point, they only had one option: to retreat and come back when the weather got better. But instead, the group decided to set up a camp out in the open at that exact spot, so that they wouldn't lose all the progress they had made on the trip. As experienced hikers, they must have thought that they could handle the weather no matter how harsh it was. At the time, the temperatures were dropping rapidly, reaching all the way to -30 degrees Celsius, and in this cold, they progressed a bit up the slope and set their camp about 100 meters from the mountain's peak. The very last entry in one of the group members' diaries read this: "It is difficult to imagine such a comfort on the ridge, with shrill howling wind hundreds of kilometers away from human settlements." After this, no one heard from these hikers. The hikers were supposed to meet some people at a rendezvous point, but when they didn't make it at the agreed time, people began to grow concerned. They did not do anything about it as they assumed that since these people were experienced, they knew what they were doing and were probably running late because of the weather. But after a few weeks of no word from them, a search party was sent to look for them. The team found their camp on February 26 and immediately knew that something was not right. The tent was torn up and buried in a layer of snow, and the hikers' gear and clothing were all neatly stacked inside it. The tent itself appeared to have been slashed open from the inside, as if someone had tried to escape from it in a hurry. 9 pairs of footprints were also found near the camp, which the search team followed and ended up in the woods. The strange thing about the footprints was that some of them were missing their boots, and judging by the spacing and indentations of the prints, they could tell that the hikers had calmly walked their way down, rather than run in panic. The footprints led the search team to a large cedar tree, under which they found a snuffed-out campfire and the frozen bodies of Yuri Doroshenko and Yuri Krivonishenko. Both of them were severely underdressed despite the harsh weather. They weren't wearing any jackets, boots, or gloves to protect themselves from the cold. The cedar tree also had some broken branches, which might have been what the hikers used to build a fire. The next 3 hikers were found sometime later, at different spots around the tent and cedar tree. They were better dressed, but were also missing their boots, gloves, and hats. In addition, the bodies had sustained minor injuries and some burn marks but seemed to have died of hypothermia, just like the other 2 bodies. The bodies were found facing the tent as if trying to desperately make their way back to it. As for the last 4 hikers, their bodies were found 2 months later, after the snow had melted a bit. They were located in the opposite direction of the tent, about 75 meters from the tree. They were buried under 3 meters of snow, and 3 of them had sustained severe injuries. One had a fractured skull, which medical examiners said resembled that of someone being slammed to a wall multiple times. The other 2 had fractured ribs and massive internal bleeding. One of the girls was missing her eyes, tongue, and part of her lips and face. Another mysterious fact was that the 3 articles of clothing had unusual amounts of radiation detected on them. The search teams and medical examiners, however, could not come up with a plausible explanation for the condition of these bodies, nor were they able to fully deduce the cause of death. The lead investigator himself concluded his final report on the case with the following cryptic entry. The cause of death was an unknown compelling force which the hikers were unable to overcome. Doesn't that just sound strange? Well, this is how the investigators closed the case. It wasn't until 2019 that the case was officially reopened by the Russian government. But this was enough time for lots of insane rumors and speculations to develop about the case. Some believe they were attacked by a Yeti, while others blame aliens as some UFOs were sighted around the area where the hikers were believed to have been camping. Some of the more sensible theories suggest that the hikers were hit by an avalanche. It was to shut down these rumors that the Russian government reopened the case, and they were only willing to investigate for signs of avalanches, snowstorms, or other natural disasters. And that's what they did. They concluded that the group was hit by an avalanche. And that was why some had been hit with serious injuries. But then it doesn't explain the sliced up tent, or the hikers wearing less clothing, or the missing eyes and tongue now, does it? Well, the missing tongue was a case of decomposition, and not a mysterious animal or a human ripping out the tongue. Because again, the only footprints that were found around the hikers were of their own feet. As for the articles of clothing with radiation, it turns out that 2 of the group members, Kolevatov and Krivonishenko, actually worked at facilities and plants which dealt with nuclear weapons and items. And the 3 articles of clothing also belonged to them. So why was the tent all slashed up? Well, a more plausible theory is that the hikers did that themselves. If you take a look at one of the photos, you can see an exhaust pipe from an internal stove. It could be that the stove had caused their tent to be filled with smoke, so the hikers cut the tent open to escape immediately. This also explains the burn marks on the bodies and clothing. So, once they were safe from the threat, they calmly walked into the woods to look for shelter from the cold, as their tent was unusable now. The more underdressed ones decided to climb the tree and gather some wood to build a fire, while the better dressed ones ventured on further. All this movement, along with unusual placement of the tent, could have potentially triggered an avalanche, which crushed them under the snow and rocks, causing the injuries and the death that ensued. The rest died in the cold while their fire ran out and were then found frozen and decomposed. When Russian officials investigated and re-examined the case, they ultimately came to the conclusion that an avalanche was to blame. In early 2021, an independent examination was done by a team of Swiss engineers who arrived at a similar outcome. They both believed that the tense placement, along with the harsh weather conditions, disrupted the slope, resulting in a minor but a powerful avalanche. Do you guys have any theories? Tell us what you think of this in the comments down below.